So I want to talk about racial slurs and the freedom of speech. The racial slur that we encounter the most in the United States is probably the N word. It's like the most tense one, and it is ridiculous. Okay, the N word. So there are two forms of the N word. There's the version and the A version. Um, People have redefined both. Okay, and then there's the word Negro. Okay, it was the Negro baseball leagues, stuff like that. So we had singular words, you know, slang words, stuff like that, but they are just describing a skin color. Okay, it's kind of like saying that is an Asian. Instead of having to say that is an Asian person, you could just say that is an Asian. That is a European. Okay, for skin color, you could say that is a, you know, use a singular word instead of having to say that is a black person or that is a African American. And for some reason, it gets tense when it's been getting tense using the word African American. Okay, white people don't mind if you call them a European American, okay, or like an English American or something like that. It's just a descriptive term. You're describing where they came from, like where they are from indigenously. Okay, so it's obvious that people have just been redefining these terms. They excuse people being attacked. Okay, they like charge people with crimes for saying these words and they claim that there's some kind of like historical meaning behind the words. Like it was actually a racist word that had this dehumanizing meaning behind it. No, it wasn't. Okay, just because the culture did dehumanize these people doesn't mean that the descriptive term for having black skin itself was dehumanizing. You're associating the cultural norm with a descriptive term and trying to act like no, it's just a descriptive term. That's like saying, "Oh, the word woman is a sexist, okay? It's a slur because the cultural norm at the time was dehumanizing women." Okay, it's the same exact thing. Any kind of slang term for the word woman, that's a slur because of the cultural norm at the time. Okay, there was no definition of these words. They're just making stuff up. There was no definition of these words that was anything other than a descriptive term of the skin color. You could go on to ask, how do you feel about a person of that skin color? And then they could say something dehumanizing, but the word itself was just descriptive. And it's an infringement on the freedom of speech to take away these descriptive words. That's why people get upset. It's because they're not being racist by using descriptive words, okay, that only describe a skin color. Okay, it's not a good thing. And then they allow one group of people to use the word, but not another. Totally racist. So, if our rights are going to be continuously, infringed upon with this subject, I just recommend creating a new word, okay, because it is wise to have a singular word to identify people of a certain trait, like a skin color, something that's regularly being spoken about as an identifying factor. So for some reason they get hostile when you say Negro. Negro is literally a Spanish word for the word black. Like it, you know, it's a Latin root. Okay, it's just so stupid. So it's obvious to me that it's just an excuse to go fight people. Okay, it's an excuse to go get people in trouble, and it's this mentality of let's make up some outrageous, rage bait kind of thing, try to gain power by getting people in trouble and being violent towards people. We have no real basis for what we're doing, but it's one of those things. So, we could come up with a new word to identify white people as a singular word, to identify black people as a singular word, instead of, saying Caucasians for white people. I don't know what you would say for black people, because all these terms have been deemed insulting. But apparently Caucasian isn't accurate for white people because it's actually referring to people from around the Caucasus Mountains. So I've heard that it's not a real good, like, accurate term to use for the white skin color. So a new term could be created. Okay, it's just like, look, this is just a descriptive term for the black skin color or the white skin color. Okay, I would probably stay away from the prefix neg because I'm just guessing that they would be hostile over it. So, I mean, I typically sense hostility anytime you try to address the black skin color mostly. But like when you're addressing skin color, for some reason, there's like tension. Like if you say African American or if you say black person or, if you say a dark skinned person, for some reason it's just like tense, and it's just a descriptive, it's a necessary thing that you have to describe when you're identifying people and stuff like that. So, totally stupid. So coming up with a singular term, I think that's probably a good idea. For white people, black people, other kinds of people. It's just more concise and efficient speech. Instead of using two words with all these syllables, you can just use one word. That's pretty much the whole reason why people make up slang terms and why they naturally, feel like they should use these singular terms for these singular descriptive terms is because that's how you're supposed to speak. You're not supposed to speak in slang, but I'm just saying you're supposed to speak in, with as few syllables as possible. Okay, be concise. That's how you're supposed to speak. So the claims of some kind of historical dehumanizing meaning behind these words, that's ridiculous. They're just descriptive terms. Okay, stop attributing the cultural norms to a descriptive term. Like I said, it's the same thing as saying the word woman is a slur now because of the cultural norms. It's the same thing. And when you talk about the freedom of speech, they're like, yeah, you can say it, but you can't say it. And like for some of these situations, like when it comes to curse words, like, yeah, you have the freedom to say a curse word, but you actually don't. It's actually harassment. And, so it's really stupid, and it just causes a lot of conflict. But basically they say the ER version is widely offensive, and, not even the black people can say it without being criticized, and the A version is reserved for the black people, which is totally racist. And they say the ER version, and like they make jokes and stuff, and it's just horrible. So they can make jokes about it and white people can't and stuff, or they get in trouble, and it's just a bunch of racism. Okay, totally unfounded in logic. A lot of violence involved. Unjust accusations and stuff. Now, are there real racial slurs? Yeah, it's when the connotation, the actual definition of the word involves something dehumanizing. Okay? It's not just a descriptive term for a skin color. Okay? It's actually something really dehumanizing, like in the definition of the term. Like, this term was not created just as a descriptive term. It was created with a definition of, some kind of offensive claim about somebody. So I don't recommend using curse words. I don't recommend using these terms that are deemed slurs. Okay, we do face oppression, and you can't always fight every single facet of the oppression. Okay. So if you want to create a new singular term to describe skin colors, people of skin colors, I'm not against that. But just understand that their explanation of why some of these current words that are deemed offensive is just unfounded. People can change the definition of words. They can okay. So it's not wise to use it. I understand the arguments about that, but that's that, and it's not really something you can argue with me about. Okay, it's just be an honest person, please.